Today we're going to do a full crash course on Claude Code. And what I mean by that is that we're going to do a crash course for power users. We're going to explore advanced features, not just basic vibe coding. We're going to take a look at stuff like MCP, Subagents, agent teams, skills, CLAUDE.md files, Worktrees, and much more that you need to know about if you want to use Claude Code to the maximum extent. However, we're still going to start with the very basics like installation and prompting first. If you like this video, let me know by hitting a like button and subscribing, but now let us get right into it.
It's a rich thing.
Alright, so this crash course today will be optimized for speed, which means we're going to cover a lot. We're not going to cover all the aspects very deeply. I do have some dedicated videos for some of them, like skills or CLAUDE.md files, but the goal here today is to give you a broad overview over all the features that are relevant to a power user, and we're also going to start from the very beginning. So what is Claude Code, how to install it, how to work with it, and then we're going to go into the individual, more advanced and more complex features. So let's get started right away. I'm going to do all the work today in a directory called tutorial on my system here, and this is basically just my working environment. Here I'm going to boot up Claude Code. And Claude Code itself, for those of you who know nothing about it, I think most people will probably know Claude Code, but the idea is you have this agentic engineer on your system. So it's a command line application, and you can basically chat with it, and then it can run commands on your system. It can read files, it can write files, it can edit files and all that. And it's basically like using a web interface like ChatGPT or Claude, but it also has access to your computer, which of course you can control. You can give it access, you can allow commands to run, you can reject it. But that's the basic idea. And for the installation, there are different ways to install it. You can install it as a terminal application, as a desktop application, as a VS Code extension, and so on. And it, of course, depends on your operating system. So on Windows, there's probably some executable. On Mac, there's also probably something that you can just download and run as an application. On Linux, it depends on the package manager you use. I think I'm using the AUR package on Arch. So yeah, there's an AUR package called Claude Code. You just have to use Yay or whatever package manager you use to get it from there and install it. So I cannot really show you the installation commands. You can just go to the documentation here. If you're an Arch user, you should not use anything from here. You should just use the AUR, and on the other systems, maybe there's also a package manager that supports it, but you just get Claude Code on your system. Once you have done that, what you can do is you can go into a directory in a terminal. Let me go full screen here, and you can run the Claude command. So Claude basically runs Claude Code on your system, and this will require you now to authenticate yourself with Claude. In my case, I already did that because I have a Claude Code subscription. So I log in, I'm connected to that subscription. I can say in this case, yes, I trust this folder. And then I can work here and do stuff. You can see it's connected to my social neural 9 account, and I'm using Opus 4.6. That is how you set up Claude Code. Now you can start using it. You can either use it in an existing directory where you have a project, or in a directory where you have an existing project, or you can build a new project from scratch. So I can instruct it now, create a basic Hello World Flask application using UV, for example. And now it will do certain things. In this case, now it will probably do UV init. It will then alter some files and so on. There you go. It says UV init. And it then also lists what's in that directory. So you can see it runs commands. For some of them, it asks for permission. For a list command, usually it doesn't do that. Then it tries to read the file that was created by UV. Now it changes that file. I can say yes, I can say no. I can also say to allow all the edits during the session, and I can also tell it here if I press tab what it should do differently. But in my case, okay, now I interrupted it. I can just say continue to keep going. And that's basically the basic setup. I think 99% of you guys watching this already know what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to end this segment here. And that's basically the basic way of working with Claude Code. Now, what maybe a lot of you guys are not using is slash commands. Now, I think most people are using the models command. So the model command is basically allowing you to switch the model. The default model, this is important, is Sonnet 4.6. Now, this is a cheaper model, a faster model than Opus, but I would never ever use it to do solid coding. I always use Opus, which is of course more expensive. It has 2x usage versus Sonnet. So if you have something extremely trivial, I would go with Sonnet or even with Haiku, which is faster. But Opus is like the thing that you want to use if you're working on a large code base, trying to do some solid refactoring or some solid new feature in an existing code base. Opus will do it right. Opus is the one model that I trust the most. But yeah, as I said, I think most people use the model command. Another command that probably a lot of people use is the rewind command. This is like an undo function basically. So you can just say /rewind and you can go to a certain point in the conversation. So I can go back here to continue and I can restore either the code, the conversation, or both. In this case, now what happens is it will reverse the main PY change and then that's it. As far as I know, they don't have a redo command. So OpenCode has redo. Claude Code does not have redo, so you cannot just go back to where you were before you did the rewind. But these are also still very basic commands. Another command that probably everybody uses is the resume command. You can see already when I close the session with Control-C, you can see it tells me I can resume the session by providing the identifier. I can also say just Claude and then -- resume in general. And this will allow me to choose from one of multiple sessions. So I can choose this one again, and basically I'm back in the session now. I can also, this is the same thing I can do with just the resume command. So I can say Claude, start a fresh session, so to say, and I can then say just resume, and it will allow me to choose the session again. So this is also a possibility. Another thing is I can also enter commands while Claude Code is doing something. So for example, I can say, implement a solid, or now let me go to Sonnet so I can not waste too many tokens here. I'm going to go with Sonnet default. Implement a to-do application with nice design. So this will take a while. And then I can say, by the way, I want it to be red. So I can add this by the way thing. And now it incorporates that into the existing flow. I don't have to interrupt it. I don't have to tell it stop. I want to do it in red. I can add that information while it's working. It will adjust what it's working on based on that. Yeah, so I think these are the commands that basically most people know about. What else is there? We have something very useful, which is usage. Usage shows you how much of your session is used, how much extra usage you have. So in my case now, this means that my current session resets at 6 p.m. I've used 9% of it just by doing this little demonstration here, or actually maybe I did some stuff before as well. Then for the whole week, it resets on April 20th, so in 5 days, and I already used 33%. And then the extra usage is basically the money that is associated with my account. I do have some funds there, so if I reach my session limit, my weekly limit, I still can use just the cash that's on my account. Then you can also take a look at stats, what you're working on, how often you're working on it. You can also see here which model you're using. You can see I'm basically always using Opus 4.6. Now I do have multiple Claude Code subscriptions, so this is not everything I do here. But yeah, basically that's one command. Another one is config, which is basically how you configure the entire Claude Code software here. Now, I'm not going to go through all these settings, but you can basically say if you want to use fast mode, if you want to use thinking mode, if you want verbose output or not, if you want to have a progress bar and all that. So everything about Claude Code can be configured here in a basic way. And then also, if you want to have really deep insights, you can go and do /insights, which is kind of interesting because that's going to take all your sessions and give you statistics about them. So it will tell you how you use Claude Code. So after a while, it tells me that there is an HTML file where I can see the insights report. I can just click on that. This will open up the browser and you can see essentially what it says about my sessions, about my way of working with Claude Code. So here it gives me like an overview. For example, I'm not sure what it means by Neural 9 rebrand. I think I started working on a new website and then it says, productive, shows a productive rhythm of specific direction. Also shows me what's hindering me, and it splits that here into what Claude does wrong and what I do wrong. And on my side, it says I have oftentimes lightweight requests that trigger heavy tool use because I don't really provide enough. I think because I don't really provide enough information in the first prompt and whatnot. And then down here, you can see what I'm working on. So it basically tells me you have a couple of sessions working on front end. You have a couple of sessions working on full stack. You have a couple of sessions working on Linux configs and so on. But yeah, then you also get some nice statistics here like response time distribution and how often I use multiple parallel sessions here and how many errors I encounter and reject and how many commands fail and how often I work in different times and so on. And much more stuff that's interesting to look at. I'm not sure if I'm censoring anything here because there might be some sensitive information. I have to look through the video and see if I now have some black square somewhere here. But that's basically what you can do if you're interested in how you're using Claude Code. All right, so these are the slash commands I want to talk about. Of course, you can just type slash and see a lot more commands that you can use and explore. For now, I'm going to leave it at that. And we're going to move on to the next thing that also a lot of people know about probably. It's not a niche feature, but it's something that a lot of people don't use if they're just using Claude Code for coding and they don't really think about how to optimize it, which is CLAUDE.md files. Now, CLAUDE.md files are just general files that instruct Claude on how to do things. So if I create in this directory here in this project, if I say CLAUDE.md, so this is a markdown file, I can give it an instruction. For example, I can say always, no matter what, start every message with the words, "Dear Mr. Arch User," for example. Let's say that is a preference of yours. So you have this CLAUDE.md file, and now I don't have to do anything with it. I can just start a Claude instance, and I can say, what is this project about? And as you can see now, as a result of this file existing, it tells me here, "Dear Mr. Arch User," let me look at the project files to understand what this is about. So I don't have to say at the beginning of a conversation, hey, I want you to do X, Y, Z. I want you to code a certain way. I want you to use this package or this package manager. I want you to use Docker. I want you to use whatever. I don't want to provide any guidelines in the beginning. I can just specify all of that in the CLAUDE.md file. Of course, usually you don't just specify something like call me Mr. Arch User. You specify the project structure. You give it the tree of the project. You explain, okay, here is where I have my authentication code. Here is where I have the main feature. Here is where I have some security relevant stuff. Every time you want to install a package, use UV add and not pip install. Every time you want to do migrations, do them in a Docker container, whatever. You just specify everything in a CLAUDE.md file, and this is the guideline for Claude to work with, and it will just read that file and see if it finds something relevant here for the task that you're giving it. So everything like code style, like always leave blank lines between, or 2 blank lines between functions, for example, you could also instruct it to do that in the CLAUDE.md file. And this can not only be done in a project, this can also be done globally in the Claude folder. So I can open up a new terminal here and I can go to .claude. And in .claude, I can also create a CLAUDE.md file here and give it global instructions that go beyond just a single project. Because if I have a CLAUDE.md file here in this project, it only applies to the tutorial project. Also, I can have CLAUDE.md files in subdirectories. So I can say here, I don't know, feature 1 or something. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Blueprint 1, I should call it in Flask. Then I could have another additional CLAUDE.md file in this feature 1. So I could say here CLAUDE.md as well. And here I could give it specific instructions. So one thing that you could do is you could just overwrite instructions of the parent file. But if you want to go deeper into that, I do have a video on this channel. There it's not about CLAUDE.md, it's about Agents.md, which is basically the same. It just doesn't have the Claude branding. It's a markdown file that you can put into your project so that different agents can react to it. If you want to go deeper into that, take a look at this video. Now, the CLAUDE.md approach can be very useful if you have some general information about the project, about the style, but oftentimes you have a lot of information for a lot of different use cases. How to use Docker, how to use your package manager, how to use your CLI tool that you implemented yourself, how to do this, how to do that. And if you put all of this into the CLAUDE.md file, you're basically using up all the context. So you don't have enough context for the actual files, for the actual code anymore. So what you want to do is you want to use something called skills. And skills is basically the same thing as a CLAUDE.md file, but split up into multiple files. So what you do with skills is you define how to use Docker, for example, and how to use the UV package manager, how to install Python packages in your project. But when you do that, you're not doing that in a central CLAUDE.md file, you're doing it in separate skills. And what Claude then does is it loads the skills if they're needed and uses only that specific information in the context. So let me just remove everything here from this directory. Now it's an empty directory here, and what I can do is I can create a .claude directory. I can go into this .claude directory, create another directory called skills, and then in this skills directory, I can create a directory for every skill I want to define. For example, I could say Python package installation. And then in this Python package installation directory, I would have to create a file called skill.md. And here in this file, what I would be doing is I would describe, first of all, I would give the skill a name, I would give it a description, and then I would give instructions. So it's important that you use a header. So we use 3 hyphens here and 3 hyphens again. And in here, we then say name of the skill, which is going to be the Python package installation skill. And then we can describe what this skill is about. So description is going to be how to properly install Python packages in this project. And my instructions here could be always use UV for packages in Python. Start with UV init if the project does not exist yet. Otherwise, use UV add, not pip install, for example. And then I could go back and I could give again the instruction here to Claude to create a Flask application. Create a Flask application with hello world or something. And hopefully it recognizes that it has to use the skill. So it creates the file. This is fine. Okay, and here it says now install Flask if needed, pip install Flask, but I will tell it now install Flask in this project. And hopefully it will recognize, oh, there's a skill. There you go. Skill Python package installation, successfully loaded skill. It didn't recognize the first time. And then it says here, okay, UV init. Even though it suggested to use pip install Flask because it didn't load the skill first, now it says, okay, we're going to use UV init because that is what the skill instructed me to do. Now, skills, as I said, is basically the same as a CLAUDE.md file, just that you have it fragmented. So you have all the different skills, all the different informations, all the different information, all the different instructions. You have them in separate files. You don't load them all at once. You just look at the header, or Claude looks at the header. Does this skill relate to what I'm doing right now? If yes, do it. If yes, load it and take it into context. Otherwise, not. So it's a little bit like CLAUDE.md with rack, if you want to call it that. All right, so we now know how to work with skills and with CLAUDE.md files. There's also a third way to add functionality or add information to our Claude agent, which is MCP, Model Context Protocol. Most of you guys probably know about it. It's basically exposing APIs to Claude Code. And how you do that is basically by using an MCP command. I copied one here because I don't want to type it out. You always do the same thing, which is Claude MCP add, and then you use -- transport, and you can use HTTP or stdio if it's local. So if you have your own MCP server. And in this case now I'm just adding DeepWiki here, which is a website. So I can just add it here as an MCP skill. And now this MCP server is added to Claude Code. I can open up Claude Code and I can use this MCP server. If I go and type MCP, you can also see here that I have my local MCPs, which is DeepWiki here connected. And also I have Google Calendar connected down here. You can use some of the Claude AI integrations here as well. But basically I can now say search DeepWiki for something. I'm not making it super fancy here. I'm just instructing it to use the skill. And let's say, for example, Flask repo is what I want to look at on DeepWiki. But this idea that it can use DeepWiki is, or this functionality that it can use DeepWiki is because we added the MCP server. It didn't have this functionality before, but the MCP basically allows it to ping certain APIs now. And in this case, now it can give us information about the Flask repo. There you go. So this was successfully used. Now, there is an extra layer on top of all of this, which is combining MCP and skills, and this is called plugins. Plugins are basically nothing new. It's not a third or fourth thing that you can use to extend Claude Code. It's basically packaging MCP servers and tools and skills and everything into a plugin that can be downloaded from a marketplace. So I can say /plugins here, or /plugin. And what I can do is I can just discover, I can look here through the default marketplace and see if I want to add something to my Claude Code instance. I can also see if I have any installed stuff. In this case, I see my MCP server. I can also add marketplaces. By default, we only have the official Claude Code plugins. So this is the only repository that we have here. We can also add marketplaces, which are maybe less secure, so be careful with that. But essentially what you can do is you can just pick one thing like front-end design, for example, say I wanna install this, and you can see it describes it as create distinctive production-grade front-end interfaces with high design quality and all of that by Anthropic. And then you can decide if you want to install this for the entire user, so across all projects, if you want to do it for the specific project and for all users, or if you want to do it for this user in this project, which I'm gonna do now here. And this now installed this plugin, which contains skills and contains MCP servers maybe. And now I can say, give my Flask application a nice, simple front end. Actually, sorry, it says here we need to do reload plugins to apply, otherwise it won't work. Now I'm gonna instruct it to do the same. And you can see now it loaded the skill front-end design, which is part of the plugin front-end design or whatever it was called. Now I'm not going to let it code out everything, but this is how you can use that. So to summarize, CLAUDE.md is the file where you give information about the project in general, the structure, where do I find what's the coding style, what are some things that you never want me to do. The general information goes into CLAUDE.md. If you have specific tool information like how to use Docker, how to install packages, how to do XYZ, you put that into skills. If you want to connect to some other provider like Google Calendar, Slack, or something like this, DeepWiki, you use MCP servers because they can expose APIs that your agent can use. And plugins basically package everything and give you a packaged set of skills or tools or MCP servers by using a marketplace. So you can just use the plugin command to install them into Claude Code. All right, so now let us move on to something else, which is working with sub-agents or multiple agents. Now, what we can do is, we can keep it like this. Let me start a new Claude Code instance here. What we can do is we can define sub-agents for certain parts of the work that has to be done. So I can go and say /agents, and here I can now go to the library and create a new agent. So I can say I want to have a new agent. This is going to be project dependent. It's not going to be a global agent across all projects. It's going to be for this one. And I'm going to generate it with Claude Code. Now I can also manually just create the files that are necessary to describe this agent, but I want to have it, I want to do it with the assistance of Claude Code. This is going to be easier. And then I can describe what this agent is about. I can say UI designer that shall focus exclusively on HTML, CSS, and JS animations, only the visual stuff. So from this description now, it's going to create an agent. And now you can see I can also limit this agent. And this is where the power comes in, because we're not just describing that use one agent for front end, use one agent for back end. What we're doing is we're also limiting specific tools. So I can go here, show advanced options if I want to see all the individual tools. And I can say, for example, that some tools don't have access. In this case, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I can say that some tools don't have access to DeepWiki, for example, or to Google Calendar. And some agents maybe only have access to Google Calendar. So the display is a little bit scuffed here, but basically I can go to DeepWiki and I can press enter to disable this tool for this specific agent. Let's just do that for the sake of showing how it works. And then I can just press continue. I don't know why it's buggy right now with the interface, but that's fine. Now I can select a model to run behind the agent. Now maybe for some agents, backend development and software architect, I want to use Opus, but for others like just design stuff, I want to use Sonnet. So let's go and use Sonnet here, and then I can also assign a color. For the UI designer, let's say I want to use something like maybe purple, seems to fit. And then I will say again, project scope, which is this specific project, is where the agent is going to be applied. Then I can see what this agent is about, the system prompt. You're an elite UI animation designer with deep mastery of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript animations. Your entire focus is on crafting visually stunning and so on and so forth. I can say I'm fine with that. There you go. Now I have my animation designer. Let's go now create a new agent and say this is going to be my backend assistant. So again, here, project level, generate with Claude, backend and DB specialist, Flask expert. This agent shall only be used for database and backend stuff. So here again, I can manage the tools, but for this one, I'm just going to say continue. I'm going to use Opus for this one. And for the backend, let's go with green. Again, I'm going to give it a project scope. I'm going to say save. And now I have two agents here. I can go back to my Claude Code instance, and I can say implement a basic to-do app in Flask. Front end should be bluish in style with nice animations. Backend in Flask. I mean, this is repetitive, but let's go. And then you can see here, let me use both specialized agents in parallel. It recognizes that this is a task with two specialists here. The backend DB specialist here is going to implement the Flask to do backend. And in parallel here, the UI animation designer will be working on the front end. Now you need to understand what the architecture here is. You still have the master agent, so which is the Claude Code instance that you're talking to. And this Claude Code instance spawns two sub-agents, which means that it now has to communicate back and forth. So it has to communicate to the backend agent and to the front-end agent, and then every communication flows through this master agent, if you want to call it that. And the reason this is important is because now we're going to talk about something else, which is agent teams, where this whole setup is different. So let me maybe show you a visualization quickly. In MyPaint, basically you have the master agent. This is not a very beautiful drawing here. And it spawns here the UI designer and the DB backend specialist, and every communication has to flow back to the master. So even if you communicate back and forth here, it's going to happen via the master. This is not the same when it comes to teams. So let's get out of Claude Code now. Now for teams, the thing is, this is an experimental feature. This is not something that is used in the main version or in the default version of Claude Code. This is experimental. I'm not even sure if this is necessary or if I would benefit from using it. I don't actually use this feature. But what you can do is you can also have agents that talk to one another. So you can have 3 different agents that explore the same topic, the same feature from 3 different angles, and they communicate with one another. For this, what you want to do is you want to start Claude Code with a certain environment variable set. And this is Claude Code experimental agent teams equals 1. This is at least necessary as of right now when I'm recording this. And then you run Claude. So with this now, you can create an agent team. And this agent team will only be created if you explicitly instruct Claude Code to do that. So I will say here, create an agent team to discuss or to brainstorm ideas for a to-do app. I'm just doing something very generic here now, from 3 different angles. And then I will say UI designer, software architect, and then maybe business person. And what it will do now is it will create 3 agents, and they're not going to be managed by the master. So they're not going to be managed by the first Claude Code instance. They will communicate with one another in a decentralized way. Okay, so actually what it did here was spawn parallel agents in the background. So this is actually not the same. So let me try again. And this time I'm going to use the example from the documentation to make sure that it actually forces the agent team use, which is here actually very similar. Design a CLI tool that helps developers track to-do comments across their code base, create an agent team to explore this from different angles and so on. So I'm going to just copy paste this here and see if this works now. And now you see what it does here is it creates to-do lists. So it creates a shared to-do list. And now we actually have an agent team because we can see here main UX agent is spawned. Then we also have the Arch agent, which is not Arch Linux, but the architect, I think, and the Devil agent, the Devil's advocate. And we can see how they now run as an agent team down below, and they will all now communicate with one another. This is now the actual mode. You can see the UI difference. What we did before was actually just sub-agents, but they now communicate with one another. We can also say Control-T to see what they're actually doing here. And you can see how many tokens they use and how many tools they use. And once they're done, they're going to be reporting back, and then we get a summary. Now, be aware that this uses a lot of tokens. So that is not a very cheap way. It's very limited. It's experimental, but this is a feature that you probably should know about. And maybe at some point it becomes more polished and part of the mainstream or of the default Claude Code installation. But there you go. We have now a summary. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to just abort but that is how you can use agent teams. Now, another feature that a lot of people don't know about is Worktrees. And Worktrees are actually a Git feature, not a Claude Code feature, but Claude Code can use Git Worktrees to allow you to run multiple Claude Code instances working separately on the same project at the same time. This is a very useful feature. I also recently made a video about this if you want to go into more detail, but the basic idea is I can run Claude or I can run Claude with --worktree. And what I have here now, I'm in a different directory. I'm working on a side project called latent assets, which is on my GitHub. The reason I'm doing this is because I need something that's already committed on GitHub, already pushed. Because what I can do now with Claude Worktree is I can create a Git worktree, which I'm not going to explain in too much detail now, but basically what this does is it creates a separate branch of the current version of the program and it checks it out into its own directory. So now you can see, since I didn't provide a name, it called this one fancy coalescing amber. And I can also go into the same directory, latent assets, and I can say Claude worktree and then feature 1 or something like this, and this will now create a branch feature 1. So now I have 2 branches with the same code in them, and I can say, for example, change the entire application style to be blue. And then here I can say change the entire application style to be green. Now, what this does is it doesn't actually work on the same code. It works on the same program, but in 2 different directories. So both start, when you use the worktree command, both start with the same initial version that is on GitHub or in the Git repository. And then one is going to make everything blue, the other one is going to make everything green. And then I have 2 different directories. Then once they're done, I can go and push them to the branches. So feature 1 or fancy coalescing amber, or I can just merge them to the main branch, which is the default setting. Again, if you want to see more about this, if you want to have more details on this, I recently made a video about this, but the basic idea is I can have now 5, 6, 7 different Claude Code instances working on the same code base on different aspects. Maybe this can be used in this case to compare blue versus green, or I can also say change the database schema in one, and in the other one I say, I don't know, do a redesign of the application. So they can be working on the same thing if I want to have an A/B test, or I can just go and work on different features without interference. And then, of course, I have to do merge conflict management and all of that. And then last but not least, what can maybe also be useful is to know how to work with memories. Now, you can also just hard code stuff into the CLAUDE.md file, but you can also just talk to Claude and tell it to remember that your name is whatever. So please remember for future sessions that my name is Florian, for example. This is going to instruct Claude to actually use a memory. So it will say here recalling one memory, writing one memory, and then if I start another session, it will understand that my name is Florian. So I can start a new session here and I can say, what is my name? And it will look into the memory and see your name is Florian. There you go. So that's it for this video today. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Also, in case you're interested, on my website, you will find a services tab and a tutoring tab. There you can contact me if you need help with a project, if you need a freelancer, if you need some consulting. You can contact me via LinkedIn or email at the bottom of the page. Besides that, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video and